This is Democracy Now! When we come back, well, it's the 40th anniversary of the shootings at Kent State. We'll speak with the sister of one of those killed. Stay with us. Crosby, Stills, Nash, and Young, Ohio. This is Democracy Now!, democracynow.org, The War and Peace Report. I'm Amy Goodman with Sharif Abdel-Qaddous.
Well, today marks the 40th anniversary of the Kent State shootings. On May 4th, 1970, National Guardsmen opened fire on hundreds of unarmed students at an anti-war rally at Kent State University in Ohio. The students were protesting the U.S. invasion of Cambodia, which was announced by President Nixon on April 30th. The Guardsmen fired off at least 67 shots in roughly 13 seconds. 4 students were killed and 9 others wounded. The 4 students shot dead were Allison Krause, Jeffrey Miller, William Schroeder, and Sandra Scheuer, all between the ages of 19 and 21. To this day, no one's been held accountable for what happened. For the survivors of Kent State, the events of May 4th, 1970 remain unresolved even 4 decades later.
To mark the anniversary, commemoration events are being held at Kent State, including a candlelight vigil and march in the Commons, as well as a truth tribunal, which we'll talk about in a few minutes. But first, we want to go back to May 4th, 1970, and hear from the survivors about what happened on that day. Alan Canfora was a student at Kent State 40 years ago and took part in the anti-war protest. He ended up being shot in the wrist. Last year, I spoke with Alan Canfora as he took me around the campus. I asked him what happened.
My name is Allison Krause. I was a member of the Kent State Students for a Democratic Society in 1968-69. 40 years ago, we raised hell on this campus. We planted the seeds of revolt, which blossomed a year later when 4 days of protest culminated with the shootings by the National Guard. Only bullets could silence our voices here at Kent State in 1970.
What did you do?
Well, we protested vigorously for 4 days, including turmoil in downtown Kent, where 43 bank windows were broken. On Friday night, May 1st, Saturday night, the ROTC building was burned to the ground. That brought in 1,200 National Guardsmen. And on Monday, May 4th, they attacked a peaceful gathering of students. About 300 of us gathered on the Commons. And they fired tear gas. They chased us over a hill, and they marched back up the hill. And at the peak of the hilltop is where there was a verbal command to fire. One guard officer shouted, "Right here, get set, point, fire." And they fired 67 gunshots down the hill. They killed 4 students, and they wounded 9, including me. I got shot through my right wrist, 225 feet away.
And explain what you saw when you were standing there.
Well, I saw the Guardsmen reach the hilltop, and we expected that they were just retreating. It looked like they were going away back over the hill where they had come from. But suddenly, at the hilltop, out of 76 Guardsmen, only about a dozen from Troop G stopped, turned, they began to fire. They continued to fire for 13 seconds. The closest student was 60 feet away. He was wounded. Another student 90 feet away was wounded. I was near the bottom of the hill with my roommate. We were both shot and injured. And then behind us in the parking lot is where all of the 4 students were killed at distances of between 265 and 400 feet. So it was nothing but a slaughter. They fired into the distant parking lot because that's where the most radical and vocal students were gathered.
And were you shot first?
I think I was. I think I was the first student shot. I was waving a black flag of protest that day. I carried that black flag as a symbol of my despair, my anger, because only 10 days earlier I attended my friend's funeral. He was killed in Vietnam at age 19. So that was very fresh in my memory, and that's why I joined the protests and I helped lead the protests May 1st through 4th on 1970. That's what led to me being shot.
And what happened after?
That was Alan Canfora, one of those shot at Kent State. To tell the story of what happened 40 years ago, we turned to a documentary that includes interviews with students and National Guardsmen who were there. This is an excerpt of Kent State, the day the war came home. It begins with former Kent State student Joe Lewis.
Suddenly, and without any warning, several of them in the lead wheeled and leveled their rifles back towards my direction. I took it to be a threatening gesture, and so being 18 and foolish, I gestured back at them by raising the middle finger of my right hand.
And at this point, it's like a film playing in slow motion for me.
I heard the word fire. I believe that was a situation of hold your fire, do not fire.
At that point, the guardsman on my right fired his weapon.
Within, again, milliseconds of that single report, the volley itself began.
I started screaming, they're shooting their guns, they're shooting their guns.
It hit us all, I'm sure, at that moment. They're trying to kill us.
I had a person targeted. I pulled the slack out of the trigger.
I assumed that we were firing warning shots, and I fired my weapon in the air.
I jumped on the ground, was praying I wouldn't get hit.
Hundreds of people were falling on the ground. And I believe that many of them were being hit.
There was one tree near me, which was right in the line of fire. And as I got behind the tree at the last second before my arm reached the safety of the tree, that's when I was hit.
Next thing I know, I got hit just below the shoulder blade in the back on the left side.
That person that I had targeted was standing in front of me yelling, "Shoot me, mother, shoot me."
Everybody else is running away, and there's this one male coming towards us. His right hand was in the upward position, giving an obscene gesture, and his left hand was somewhat behind his back.
My mind was racing. My mind was telling me that this is wrong, that this is not right.
I was giving an obscene gesture for the first time that day, but I wasn't screaming, and I wasn't moving.
This is not right. This is not right. This is not right.
At that point, I felt that I was in jeopardy, and I fired on the individual, and he dropped.
And I believe someone said that they heard me say, "Oh my God, they shot me."
The next thing that I remember was there was an order from the rear of where we were, someone yelling to cease fire, which it stopped immediately.
The shooting lasts a total of 13 seconds. A total of 67 bullets are fired. One of those bullets has passed through the wrist of Alan Kanfora.
It was kind of an eerie calm, just for a split second. We waited to hear if there were any more bullets that were going to be fired, and there were none. And then all you could hear in the air after that was screaming, crying, people shouting for ambulances.
And we were told to return to the Commons area, and that's when we went back down the hill and back across the Commons to where we originally started at our staging point.
We had no clue as to how many people were hurt. Our fear was that it was awful.
Dean Kaler lays face down on the practice field. A bullet has passed through his spine, paralyzing him for life.
That's one thing I'll never forget about that day. Just seeing the looks on the faces of the students who were standing over me, not knowing that there was 12 other people out there shot.